If your heart's in it, you make a good meal.
Yeah.
But as opposed to simply the love for the industry, I'm in love with people turning their hobbies into financially viable entities. And I think that is where my heart sits more than not. See, a lot of people in love with stuff, but not always making bank. I say, let's make bank. That's what I'm about.
Hospitality originally started off in the 1700s, 1500s even, right? And remember back then, man was an explorer. Man himself, in his very nature, he was an explorer. Children are disappearing. Children are literally dying. And the levels of crime are just so terrible. Now, when you ask yourself, are we still a hospitable nation? When you ask yourself that question, are we still a hospitable nation? You can answer that for yourself,
Loud and proud.
It's loud and proud, and it's protected, it's preserved.
And they're not defined by a burger and chips. I mean, that's just the stereotypical scenario.
It's a movie.
Yeah, it's a movie.
The mainstream.
America, if I say, what do you think of
hot
first?
dog with the mustard?
If it's not a burger, a corn dog, or deep fried chicken.
Sure.
I mean, I think from there you start getting stuck. I'm not sure what else this is about, but we all know that the culture.
Yams.
It's way richer than that.
What's a side hustle for many of us is actually the main hustle. But circumstances make it a side hustle because the sustainer of our livelihoods is what we're not entirely passionate about, but a system that works.
The Victorians during the period 1837 to 1901 were said to be particular about their dining etiquette. To them, the mere act of eating included a set of complex rules and rituals. This was reportedly a time of strict social codes and formalities, especially when it came to dining. When it, for instance, came to the arrival of guests, punctuality was considered a virtue. Arriving late was not only socially unacceptable, but was deemed downright disrespectful. It was reportedly customary that when the guests arrived, they were greeted by the host and the hostess. The seating arrangements were of critical importance, typically organized according to social ranking and gender. Only once all guests were seated, dining could begin. It's important to, however, point out, experience of dining was not about satisfying one's hunger. It was more a social experience used to display one's table manners and refinement. It was typical during these events for a minimum 3-course meal to be served, with soup followed by fish as a starter, the main course after, followed by a dessert. Each course was accompanied by its own set of cutlery, which had to be used in the correct order, moving from the outside in. Victorians were expected to maintain a certain demeanor at the table. Certain behaviors were considered a breach of etiquette. While dining, Victorians were expected to engage in only polite conversation, avoiding controversial topics, and maintaining a cheerful disposition. It was customary to focus on the person on your left during the first course and the one on your right during the next. The main course would be followed by dessert, then coffee and liqueurs. After the entire meal, the ladies would retire to the drawing room, leaving the men to discuss politics and business over cigars and brandy. Rules of etiquette when eating in Japan. Number 1. Both your hands should be above the table. No elbow should be on the dining table. Number 2. Always bring the food to you. Never lower yourself for you to reach your food. Number 3. Always carry a small bowl or plate with your spare hand for support and to catch any spillage. Number 4. You can also use your spare hand to cover your mouth while you're chewing. And finally, number 5. Don't be afraid to use your hands when you need it, especially when you need to peel away parts of certain foods, such as shrimp or prawns.
Zant, welcome to the Cooking Soul Hospitality Edition podcast. I'm very excited that we're able to start this because this is something that's been brewing with me and a couple of people that I know for quite some time now. I'm very excited as well as somebody who's really just getting into this whole podcasting thing because I feel that it's time. I feel that it's time that we get into certain things that not only involve individuals, me just as a person, but things that affect us, as common people, as a community, as a society, as a nation even, and even the world. So welcome to the Cooking Soul Hospitality Edition. We're going to talk about a lot of things that are pertaining to the hospitality industry, but we're going to talk about a lot of things that are also pertaining to who we are as people. Who we are as people in terms of race, who we are as people in terms of gender, who we are as a people in terms of professionals, who we are as a people in terms of entrepreneurs, who we are as a people just as just human beings evolving and just being. So with that having been said, welcome once more to Cooking Souls, the Hospitality Edition. Yeah, well, today, look, I'm super blessed. I'm very, very stoked to be sitting here with the gentlemen that are on the right of me, which I'll introduce to you just now. I'm excited because I know these brothers from a while ago. I know them from school many years ago. And life has taken us through our different journeys. We've evolved since the last time when we were in school. I've worked with one for quite some time. And as we were growing up, trying to discover who we are as guys, who we are as men, who we are as people. And I'm very excited for this full circle moment where I'm able to sit down with him and I'm able to pick his brain and I'm able to hear his journey and how he climbed his mountain to get to where he is today. So, sit back, relax, enjoy with me as we go through a journey of self-rediscovery, as we go through a journey of also discovering the world around us. Because I think at this time of podcast, this time of media, this time of busyness, I think we lose ourselves in the moments that come through life because they're coming at us at a very fast pace. We don't actually just get to sit down and actually get to enjoy the moment, get to enjoy, what's happening in our lives, get to discuss what's going on, have some bit of a perspective in terms of what's really going on. Where do we fit in? Do we need to adjust anything here, there? Should we let things go? Should we, put our hands on the helm? Are we losing it? Or is this actually what we're supposed to be fighting for in the same place? So without talking too much, because I know that I want to introduce to you guys the subject matter experts who are hosts when it comes to the hospitality industry. You'll get to see why I say this in a little while. I have immediately next to me, a brother to me, Nqobani Mlagisi.
Yeah.
I've known him since, the early 2000s from school. And like I said, our journey kept on intertwining with one another, even when we went into the workspace together. And then we went for some time evolving without each other, and then we rekindled again, some kind of a brotherhood thing, which is why we're sitting here today and we're able to obviously have this podcast. So, my brother, good to be sitting with you here. Good to be chilling with you. Thank you for organizing and making this possible. I really appreciate it. In a nutshell, if you had to tell me, but you're actually just telling everybody that's joining us here, because I have a bit of an idea who you are, but who is Nqobani Mlagisi?
Well, first and foremost, Nqobani Mlagisi is a cooking soul.
Yes, sir.
So a cooking soul is a soul that cooks, someone that loves and has got the passion for cooking. Cooking for people, cooking for family, cooking for brothers, cooking for sisters, cooking for community. So within our world of hospitality, we have coined the term cooking soul to represent our mothers, our grandmas, our aunties, our sisters, anybody that cooks with love and passion, anybody that cooks for the community. And because as we've journeyed through academia in terms of learning, to be a chef, to be one of the best in the kitchen. We've come to realize that the narrative, obviously, in academia, comes from a Eurocentric perspective.
Yeah.
So we are Africans. We're in Africa. So we, being called a chef did not feel quite right to me, because I felt like, no, man.
Yeah.
I honestly do not relate totally, to the whole philosophy and the big hats that that's commandeering sort of authority of a chef, because here in Africa my experience has been that cooking, it's really out of love, and also within our African perspective as well, it's all about cooking for the needy, because we are constantly hungry. We're always fighting for food sustainability, sustainable food systems. So within that ideology, the term cooking soul, it's something that spoke to me, and something that I felt that, it's this term defines who we are, within hospitality.
Yes.
We are a team of cooking souls, and we have all different perspectives and approaches, but it all contributes towards the image of our hospitality.
Yeah. I remember when I first got acquainted with this whole cooking soul term.
Yeah.
We were having a reunion with some of our brothers, from school, and then, our careers and stuff.
Yes, yeah.
And I remember we had just formed this WhatsApp group just to reunite and just to have a little get together and just to catch up with life after 10 years or so of not having seen one another, and having, evolved and developed into the people that we are today, husbands, business owners, entrepreneurs, professionals, and things like that. And I remember you obviously prepared food for us in that get together.
Yeah.
And it was a lovely spread. And I remember how that reminded me of back in the day when we used to live together, and how you used to prepare food for us while we were working at the same company, and we'd come home and just eat these gourmet meals and stuff like that,
Yes.
And I remember being excited to see you, and you likewise, and I go, yeah, no, so listen, I'm doing this thing, I'm starting this podcast thing, I've written a book, and you were telling me what you were doing, and I'm like, so I would like to put you on my website as well, just so that I can give my website some pop and this and that and that, so I'm going to put you and your brother there, and I'm going to say, these chefs and da-da-da-da-da, and you put me to school immediately, and you said, no, Chief, I'm not a chef. I was like, say what? But I mean, I know you to be one, so what do you mean? What do you mean you're not a chef? And you said, I'm a cooking soul. And I said, okay, that's interesting. I've never heard that before. So unpack that for me. What's a cooking soul? And that's exactly what you've done just now. So I've had this experience of understanding what a cooking soul is. And then it spoke further into, the name of your company and the brand and so on.
Yes, 100%. You know? And also in further defining the spaces that have been career-wise, health and safety is also a solid industry, is also a part of me, is also what I'm involved in. So I am a health and safety practitioner, and I've worked in, some, concrete and solid SOEs, and also within the banking industry also. And because health and safety is something that is quite important, and it goes hand in hand with our hospitality as well. Because we cannot do without that aspect of, of the whole operations of our hospitality industry. So where I am right now at 45, I'm a man who has managed to find himself in between both worlds, both worlds of health and safety and the world of hospitality.
Right.
Because when that combines, that is my happy place. That is my happy place, because you can never be passionate about something without being also passionate about the compliance aspect of it as well. Right. So that's who I am, and that's what defines me at this current moment in time.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
Right. We have another gentleman next to him, Mr. Mbuso Mlagisi, his younger brother. I knew him a little bit. I was closer more to his brother growing up, and I knew a little bit about Mbuso. It was a kind of situation where I knew him through his brother. And I was pleasantly surprised over the years to see what they've done with the company Cooking Soul and to see that they're together. And I realized that there's a story, there's an organic story there, there's a human story there over and above the business, which is part of the things that interest me when it comes to commerce, when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to the things we do, because there's a passion behind much of what we do, I'm a creatively inclined entrepreneur myself. So if I do anything, it's not just about the bottom line of it. It's not just about the money aspect of it, which is important, of course, but it's what it stands for. It's the impact that it has, and it's the legacy that it leaves behind, and so on. So, Brambu, just let us know who you are in a nutshell, according to your understanding of who you are.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Mbuso Mlagisi. I'm Q's younger brother.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm an accidental cooking soul, if ever there was such a thing. I think I got pulled into the space, but once you're in the space, you can't help but fall in love with it. I was exposed to experiences that actually immersed me in the world of cooking. I think I'm a functional cook.
Yeah.
Like quite a number of men who cook out of functionality.
Yeah.
But I also don't think you should cook something if your heart's not in it. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like you can taste the fact that this person cooked mechanically.
Sure.
So if your heart's in it, you'll make a good meal.
Yeah.
But as opposed to simply the love for the industry, I'm in love with people turning their hobbies into financially viable entities.
Yeah.
And I think that is where my heart sits
Yep.
more than not. See, a lot of people in love with stuff,
Yeah.
but not always making bank. I say, let's make bank. That's what I'm about.
In a nutshell.
That's it.
Just like that. All right. So, gents, I think let's pop the hood,
right, yeah.
In the beginning of the episode, we've released some clips that show how hospitality looks in different continents, right? You look at the Europeans and they have this whole Victorian theme of what dining looks like, right?
Yes,
They've got a whole dining table, right? With a head of the table and possibly if the person is married, the queen. The neck of the table will be sitting right opposite there. And then aristocracy, tells you that on that table, it's going to be the most important because, not all animals are equal in the animal farm.
Yes.
So the nobles will be closest, to the royals. And it'll go down, to the clergy and so on. And if you're a peasant and you find yourself to be included in the table, it's some Cinderella stories by the grace of some god, but you'll find that the people who are the lowest echelon of society in that setup are the ones who are serving. They're the ones in the black and white.
Yes.
They're the ones who are preparing the food. They are the help. They don't fraternize. They don't socialize. They don't make eye contact. They don't speak. They are just the facilitation of this whole aristocracy and this whole social class thing that's going on in this whole cultural aspect.
Yes.
Right? And then when you go to the Asians, I looked a little bit while, in the build-up of this podcast because I wasn't really familiar. You are the one who, who's in this space.
Yes,
and I suppose because of our kinship, I became interested in what hospitality looks like in different areas, in different continents. How are different continents, expressing and manifesting this hospitality thing in terms of their hotels, in terms of their restaurants,
Yes.
in terms of their decor, in terms
Yes.
of, their uniforms, but overall also in terms of how they present themselves and the manner in which they also engage the person who's coming in to
Yes.
say, listen, welcome to our space. This is how we do things, and be part of our experience,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes, yes.
So when I looked at the two roles that we did in the beginning, and we looked at the European side of things, and we look as well at the and we look as well at the Asian side of things, then I become interested in the South African native side of things. How do we fit into this whole thing? What's our offering? What's our if you're a commerce person and if you're in business, and if you've submitted a business plan or two to some funding institution, there's a SWOT analysis, but you also know there's a unique selling proposition.
Yes.
What is it about your thing that should make me as an investor put money in your thing, that your thing is different from all the other things that really serve the same kind of purpose, right? So when we look at us, when we look at South Africa, being dangerous to put it like that as South Africa, because it's such a rainbow nation, right?
Yes.
It belongs to so many cultures, so many ethnicities, so many cultures and so on. But I'm more particularly interested in the native black indigenous
Yes.
South African aspect of the culture. How does that look for us in hospitality, whether in terms of accommodation in hotels, whether in terms of food, in terms of restaurants and cafes and stuff like that?
Listen, man, it's, you've said quite a mouthful, and my mind literally in answering that, I simply want to touch on the origins of hospitality, you know? The origins of hospitality originally, it started off in the 1700s, 1500s even, right? And remember back then, man was an explorer. Man himself, in his very nature, he was an explorer. He needed to travel and explore and discover. Now, as that was happening, they'll meet other tribes. They'll meet other races along the way. And as they meet, they'd obviously asked for what? To be accommodated as travelers who are exploring. And as explorers went on to their different journeys, these humble accommodations that were being provided by simple families, families that had an extra bed, families that had an extra room. They'll provide accommodation to the soldiers, to the messengers. So it kept on growing. And as innovation came into the space, and as human created better technology to travel, like ships, hospitality, the nature of it evolved even further, because now people were able to travel in larger numbers to go and explore and discover a certain country, a certain place.
Sure.
So hospitality evolved gradually up until the current space where we are in now, where we've got big hotels.
Yeah.
Because the nature of traveling is still there.
Yeah.
So in the different places that people travel to historically, they will find pure authentic hospitality. You'll be welcomed in a certain way. You'll be accommodated in a certain way by a certain tribe. You'll eat food that is totally different from the food that you eat as well. And what you'll notice is that those tribes made sure that they preserved their recipes, they preserved their cultural values, right? Because when you walk into a different province or a different region where there's a different tribe, there's a certain way of life that you need to align yourself with.
Right.
Because culture is number one. Culture defines people, and culture defines hospitality.
Sure.
And in the South African context as it is right now, unfortunately, I must say, it's being diluted. Extremely diluted at a very fast pace. Look at what's happening in Johannesburg. We're in Johannesburg right now. Mr. Morero himself, he's busy providing accommodation to hundreds of God knows, undocumented people. Hundreds.
Yeah.
People that have managed to flood South Africa without any sort of track or trace of who they are.
Sure.
Right? And this has happened literally in front of deserving South Africans who've been waiting for these new developments. So now, when you ask me about our hospitality in terms of what is it like now, it's being diluted by acts like that. It's easy to say these are acts of treason, because these South Africans are the same South Africans that are paying tax. They pay tax to be accommodated. They pay tax to so that improvement happens in all spheres, but most importantly within the hospitality space, because hospitality has got serious value, brings serious revenue into this country. And hospitality is a sense of pride for any citizen in any country in this world. They pride themselves of their hospitality, because their hospitality It's their culture. It's what they wear. It's what they eat. It's the music, you know. It's the ethics. It's the morals. It's what defines society. That's why certain countries, like Switzerland especially, you need to look at Switzerland, the way it operates. You need to zone in on Switzerland's hospitality. They have preserved their cultural values. They've made sure that anyone that comes into Switzerland aligns with the values that they have built over time. Hence, they've got a very hospitable society, a very hospitable and crime-free environment for families to be able to travel there. But the way it's happening right now in South Africa, it's highly, highly questionable. If I was staying in Europe and I look at South Africa, I would ask myself, what is the South African hospitality identity? What will I experience in South Africa when I go there now? Because from where I am, it looks like it's almost turning into a Western Africa shanty town type of thing, whereby the actual natives in there are being diluted. We are a beautiful country, and it's like being given a canvas. And the tribes of South Africa have been the paint, the arts, literally the image and the color of hospitality, because these tribes are colorful. Our tribes are colorful. We're beautiful. We've got food, we've got fashion, we've got music, and we're very, very proud in who we are.
Right.
The unfortunate thing is that the people that govern us and lead us, they do not see our beauty in our diversity.
Yeah, look, that's coming out very clear in what you've just said, because I made sure to listen to the very end so that I get the gist of what you're saying. And as you were talking in my head, I was thinking you're actually right in terms of hospitality being more of an inward out kind of expression.
Yes.
Right? If I'm going to Singapore, I'm not going to Singapore expecting a Joburg experience.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
If I go to Abu Dhabi, or Dubai, I'm not expecting a KZN or a Cape Town experience in those places respectively. I go to those places specifically looking for a Dubai, Abu Dhabi kind of hospitality.
Yes.
And to your point, I know that if I'm going to go to the UAE, there are certain things that are a normality perhaps in South Africa that won't fly when I get there, so to speak. There are certain things that I know I can't do. I know that if I want to have a drink, at a bar, I need to be licensed.
Yes.
If I'm in the UAE, for me to be able to purchase liquor and consume liquor.
And more importantly, to even open that business.
Before I even open a business, just to consume it, just as an individual, just as a natural person, not even as an entity. There are just rules and regulations, house rules and regulations and rules of engagement, just societally.
Yeah.
If I'm going with a significant other of mine, she would know not to put on, an outfit that would be deemed in that culture as being too revealing. And thereby, infringing on their cultural and their morals and their laws in terms of that. So as you were speaking to me, I'm hearing that hospitality, and I took it down all the way down to the family, right?
Yes.
And I'm like, if the Mayoyos invite, you or the Mlagisis, when you are coming to our household, it's very important that we make sure that we give you a Mayoyo hospitality.
Yes.
Right?
I want to feel your closer, experience.
Correct. Yeah. And it's important to me as the owner and as the custodian of the home you are coming into to make sure that we give you that Mayoyo hospitality.
Yes.
And by the time that you leave and you're in the car back to your home, I need to be proud with my family to say, we represented ourselves very well. So I got that part in your response.
Yeah.
The other part that I got in your response is the governing aspect of us as a Mayoyo family. We have rules, right? We have house rules, right? There are ways in which we do things in this household. We have an identity.
Yes.
There's a certain kind of culture and lifestyle that we push, that we subscribe to. that we want to welcome you into and want to share with you.
Yeah.
Kind of situation. So I suppose as you were talking and you were talking in the levels that you were, where it made sense to me is when I brought it down to humanity
Yes.
and I brought it down to just a relationship with just people. It really is true that there must be rules that govern how this household is run.
Yes.
And there must be rules that make sure that we protect and we preserve, you know, the household itself
Yes.
with its ability to sustain itself and to also open its doors for others to also experience and enjoy what this household can offer.
Yes.
But if we then, as the people who are maybe leaders in that household, fail to define those principles,
Yes.
those rules and regulations, enforce them, so to speak, and live by them, then we've already failed because we kill ourselves and we kill the opportunity to be able to allow other people into our space and be able to enjoy things according to the way.
Exactly.
So that's how I actually picked up what
Now
you're
the
saying. I
sad
don't know.
reality is when you do not enforce those basic moral values and ethics that are aligned to your culture, who you truly are, they get diluted, they get infiltrated, because what will happen, you'll get people coming into that space, a very sacred space that defines your identity,
Okay.
and they will literally break each and every rule you can ever think of,
Yeah.
because
You didn't set it for them.
you are actually not enforcing anything. They see
Right.
that you actually do not care about yourself. You do not have a sense of pride, because if it were them, you wouldn't dare do that, which is the reality in South Africa. We have a lot of influx of undocumented people that are breaking the moral values of our society. And what I mean by that is children are disappearing. Children are literally dying. And the levels of crime are just so terrible. Now, when you ask yourself, are we still a hospitable nation? When you ask yourself that question, are we still a hospitable nation? You can answer that for yourself, you know? You can answer that for yourself. You can drive through Kempton Park looking for a place where you can literally go, you know what? I just landed at the airport. But I bet you, Kempton Park Central right now, it's unhospitable. It is dirty, it is filthy. Those moral values that governed our society, that preserved who we are, that protected our children, that gave us food security, that gave us literally, security within the neighborhoods, they are gone. They are gone.
Sure.
Now, why? The question is why?
Yeah.
And why is it being allowed to happen? Why?
First of all, who is responsible for ensuring? Because I think what you're doing now is you're opening the conversation,
Yes.
you're making it very wide. So let's explore it. Who is responsible, according to you, to ensure that those controls and those mechanisms are in place to ensure that we're able to, like I said, preserve and protect our ability to sustain ourselves as a house? And then not only that, be able to open our doors to, according to your words, officially open our doors to documented people who go through the right channels and pay the right costs to ensure that they also get to partake in what we're able to experience. So who are we looking at here? Are we looking at the state? Are we looking at the community? Are we looking at systems of, civil, if you will, I don't know, human bodies, community bodies, society bodies, private institutions? What are we looking at here? What are you making us talk about?
First of all, my first answer to you is that I feel like saying there's no one responsible, because we do not have a National Health and Safety Committee. I would like to say that we do not have one because I have not seen a body of that nature that is made up of qualified health and safety specialists in various industries that would report to the president directly. Because the president, in terms of governance, he needs to have that structure in place, because that health and safety committee on a national level will literally be giving the government, information in terms of the types of risks that the nation is facing.
Right.
And the types of laws that need to be put in place to obviously strengthen, the mitigating measures that need to be in place.
Right.
So when that structure is not there, that is why clearly you have a president coming to tell us, to give us a report on television about food safety.
Right.
That is a laughable situation, Where is the Health and Safety Committee in the food industry?
Noted.
That is made up of people that studied microbiology, people that actually know how to, implement HACCP, which simply stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points.
Right.
Where are these people? And my question is, where are the other, associations or bodies within the hospitality? Where are they? Because guys, food security here, when children are dying within communities because our food supply chain has been infiltrated and is contaminated, literally food is literally arriving at the Durban port in huge containers, expired as it is. Expired as it is. Are we now a dumping ground?
Yeah.
Don't we have a sense of pride anymore?
Yeah.
That is something you need to ask. So border controls, if you're failing, immigration, it's failing.
Okay. Okay.
Literally, where are the food safety officers at the borders? Because these are the guys who wouldn't dare allow expired products to be coming into our country.
Right.
They wouldn't dare, because he's a food safety officer. Not a politician who's just coming there to trend. He cares about his passion. He's not a comrade. He's not a, he's not. What do these comrades do? Like when you're just given a position and a chair in an office, what is that?
Cadre deployment.
Whatever that is, So the lack of professionals from our hotel schools, it's really, really sad. I mean, I went to a hotel school, and I can tell you now, most of my colleagues, literally, they went abroad. And when they came back, they did not go back into hospitality. I spent a good 5-6 years in England. When I came back, I did not dare work in any kitchen here because it was a flipping tribal politics. It was a whole thing that, hey, man, you're 24 years old, you need 10 years South African experience. What is that? But going back to the controls, border controls are failing because we do not have the right professionals at the border controls. We've got so many hotel schools with students that studied, to enforce certain aspects of food safety, but they are not absorbed. You look at that by how the municipalities are structured. Each and every municipality is supposed to have a workforce of competent food safety officers,
All right.
competent health and safety officers. Those are the guys that literally govern, approve, monitor, and mitigate all the food operations in each and every city and municipality.
Right. I'm going to pause you there because you've touched on a lot,
Yeah.
and I just want to open up some of the things that
Yes.
you've just spoken about. Because in a way, you are answering my question in terms of who's responsible.
Yeah.
So clearly now from your response, we can tell that the state has a role to play.
Yes.
And you touched on a very important matter, which is border controls. You touched on another matter, which is very important, which is immigration.
Yes.
You touched on another aspect, which is very important as well, which is import
Yeah.
regulations
Yes.
and the regulatory framework when it comes to imports. In your colorful language, you said, are we a dumping ground kind of thing?
Yes.
So fine, I get it. So for me, as you were speaking, because you must remember, I have a commerce background.
Yes.
So
yes.
I'm listening to somebody who's literally schooling me and making me understand the extent of what hospitality is about.
Now money has taken over.
Correct.
Right? I like, the fact that I've been triggered by you saying that you're from a commerce
background.
Commerce
yeah.
background.
Yeah.
Commerce is
At the
exactly
forefront of everything now.
it's exactly why this is happening.
Right. Right.
There's somebody there with a big pot belly, I'm sure you can fill 3 poker pots in there. All he cares about is the money that is going to get from that expired container arriving in Durban and making its way to South Africa.
No arguments.
It's all
that has
commerce.
become our bottom line in every aspect of society at the moment. No arguments. But the point I want to get to ask the question and get you to also speak more on the response that you're giving, because when you were talking, then a picture was being painted in my head that if commerce has become the bottom line, and we are now at let's leave border controls and immigration for now. We'll come back to that. But now we are at the port in Durban, and the imports are coming in, and the shipping containers are coming in with all the foodstuffs from the different importers that our state, has and private sector is trading with, right? And then you are saying to us that somebody is supposed to be there to oversee the foodstuffs when it comes in, check the level, of health and safety in terms of that food. So we're going to check things like, has the food expired or not? Is the food fit for human consumption or not?
Yes.
Is the food according to the quality of the minimum standard, required standards that we have in terms of our South African regulatory framework when it comes to food, health, and safety and things like that.
Yes.
So now when you spoke about those things, then you triggered my mind to look at what's even happening in terms of, the food poisonings that are being, aired in mainstream media at the moment in our country, where there are children dying from food poisoning that's coming from the spaza shops, that's being distributed in our peri-urban and semi-rural and even rural areas in our communities, where there's a spaza shop perhaps for every segment of society. And if we're not checking food at the port to check if it's expired or not, to check if it's counterfeit or if it's the original thing, to check if this thing is fit for human consumption or not, and if there's not that competent, passionate, not driven by commerce, not cadre deployed individual sitting there whose sole purpose is to make sure that what comes into our land is going to actually nurture and is going to sustain the people within it, as opposed to make their health vulnerable, such that we're looking at children dying and we're looking at chronic diseases and things like that.
I would like my brother to chip in here, because he's a father. He's not just a brother now. He's a father. With 2 kids. So, and I can tell you now that chances are, for fathers like him, his level of concern is literally way up.
Should be higher.
Because when kids start going to school, he's not with his son.
At school.
Right? So he starts to wonder about the school supply chain, because of what's happening.
Right. Right.
So it's I think you can speak for yourself on that,
I think I'm going to take the conversation back almost to its root.
Right.
Firstly, you cannot deny that there are some inhospitable intrusions as far as South Africa is concerned. But it's also not a unique problem. It's a global issue.
Right.
So I got to put it in context. And then also, I am also naturally wired to see what's working and to move with the energy of what's working and to build moving forward.
Right.
Because I find that to be a much more productive approach to any challenge. So now I think maybe I sold myself short on the introduction. So now you got to expand this thing a bit more.
Right.
So as opposed to being an accidental cooking soul, what else does one do?
Yeah.
So I help organizations ignite the cultures that drive strategic execution. And that's putting it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And you can hear, we're talking about culture and hospitality. Diversity builds up great nations.
Yeah.
United States is a case in point. The UK is a case in point.
Right.
But funny enough, authentic culture anchors those nations and defines their identity. Doesn't matter if you're Chinese or Asian or Indian. When you go to America, you have the freedom to be what you are, but you're anchored by the strength of the American culture, which says you can build your dream in this in this particular country.
great.
And it happens like that because it's loud and proud.
Loud and proud.
It's loud and proud, and it's protected. It's preserved.
Correct.
And they're not defined by a burger and chips. I mean, that's just the stereotypical scenario.
It's a movie.
Yeah, it's a
That's
movie.
the mainstream.
America, if I say, what do you think of
Hot
first?
dog with the mustard.
If it's not a burger, a corn dog, or deep fried chicken.
Sure.
I mean, I think from there you start getting stuck. I'm not sure what else this is about, but we all know that the culture,
Yams.
it's way richer than
Hollywood,
that.
yeah.
So something else that is broad, that is important. Speaking as a South African citizen and as a South African resident, I'm also a beneficiary of the very system that we are also challenging. For example, that allows, because it's a governance issue, it's about implementation. As we all know, in the South African context, the laws are there. And I think the ethos of the country and what it wants to stand for, it's all there.
Right.
However, it's just not enough of it. We just need more of it. And when I look at my roots, being born in Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
I'm a beneficiary
Yes.
of the systematic integration into another country in a lawful manner.
Right.
And that is rich.
That's really good.
That is rich. I'm sitting here, I'm a
Yeah.
beneficiary of that.
Yeah.
So that very system that's like, hey, at the moment it's failing in certain instances. It is also working in certain instances, dependent on the route that that potential resident seeks to follow. So now coming back to hospitality, what there isn't enough of is just there isn't enough pride in what it is that we are as a Southern African region, and even more so in the South African context.
Of things.
Where is that evident? It's evident on your retail front.
Right.
So coming from a commerce background,
Yeah.
if you look at the retail end and you look at the square meterage that is occupied at the retail end acutely from the food industry perspective,
Right.
KFC will be the first franchise in this country to hit 1,000 stores across this entire country.
Fact.
Hot on their heels are all the other players, the Debonairs, and they're not paying us to mention their names, but they are well known and they are winning from a commercial perspective. The 4 P's of marketing: position, price, you name it.
Sure.
So we need more pride to start saying, you know, can we also participate? So when you look at other players in the space, when you look at the Theo Baloyis occupying space
Right.
as
within
Batch,
yes.
but due to our lack of confidence, and those are other demons now. I'm talking about other demons. People are already asking, hey man, how many stores do you want?
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. Aren't you almost cracking on 40?
He's opened one in Namibia now, I think, as well.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
only just started.
Just begun.
He barely owns even maybe half 8% of the commercial value that sits on the retail front. He's only just begun.
Facts.
Compare him to a Total Sports. Look at the penetration. It's only just the beginning.
Facts.
If you look at the food industry, sadly to say, who arguably even competes at the retail front with what we are normally consuming there, whether it's pizza and burgers and whatever. You know, where is Mulefe?
Nothing is coming
Where
to
is
mind.
Mulefe?
Where is the South African brand
Nothing
in
is
all
coming
these
to
milk?
mind.
Yeah, you know? Yes, we have a few spots. We've got Maxes, and we're so proud of those guys.
Right.
Because they are a reflection of what is possible, but we haven't even begun. We haven't even begun. So we need to occupy space. And so,
But the bigger question is, what is the challenge there?
yes, there are challenges, and those challenges are not just acutely focused on access to finance as traditionally structured by banking industry. We know they have their limitations, and even if you study them, they look like they also have a bias in terms of who can access this finance, so on and so forth. But look at the collectivity. If we had to take a leaf out of the page of how we eat as Africans, we eat in a communal form. If we take it back to Ezlalini, we take it back to the farms, there's normally a fire there, and we spread this food all around. We are struggling to translate our natural African values into viable commercial, penetration into the market.
What do we have before we get to government? What do we have before we get to private sector money? What do we have before, we start speaking politics? Because, those are bottomless pits sometimes. What can we control? And then we can say engage us, because you can see we've built you a pattern. Now at least you can measure that we're in an existential situation and we're clearly self-sustainable, but we could be more if we partnered with you, if you played XYZ role?
You know what? Quite a complex question, but I feel like, you know what? First of all, what we'll always have, it's our core ethnic identity.
Right.
That you cannot, that is an unshakable foundation. So, and no one is able to take that away from you. You can even go to Europe, you will still be a Xhosa man. I can go
Right.
to America, I'll still be, you know,
Yeah.
and the Ndebele speaking man.
Correct.
Do you understand?
Yes,
so,
sir.
so that is what we have in South Africa. You've got Ndebeles, you've got Zulus, you've got Xhosas, you've got Amavenda, you've got Basotho, you've got Mapede, Botswana, you name them all. Chitsonga as well. I mean, we've got that in common, you know. Everybody that identifies with who they are, that is their sense of pride. So now, what's lacking in this modern world that we're in now is what can I say? It's a civil movement.
Civil movement.
It's a civil movement that can literally be part of decision-making processes that can potentially affect our cultural, moral values and ethics, which preserve who we are, which also preserve our identity, preserve our hospitality.
At the foundation.
At the foundation.
At the core.
You know? Because we're now living in a modern society and we're being infiltrated through the modern system. Back in the days, you show up in a certain part of this country, undocumented. Believe me, that tribal man, that man who's proud of who he is, proud of his culture, who is so full of moral values. He's the first person who will stop you and correct your ways and say, hey, not here. You know, this is how you need to behave. This is how you actually need to, you know, slowly bring yourself into our way of life. You know, so that's what used to happen back in the day. You know,
I like that. That's really good.
On the spot. Yeah. So, because of the modern way of life and the so-called democracy, you know, it allows us to be easily disrespected, diluted in terms of, you know, our identity and whatnot. And so we need a civil movement that literally preserves us.
I'm being mindful of time. 5 minutes.
So, okay, fine. It's so difficult to divorce yourself from the private sector and the government. Because, I mean, the influence that they have is just massive. But let's park them. I mean, how did we trade prior to the systems that we have in place?
Good question.
You know, so, I mean, we could trade chickens for goats. We could trade, you know, cows for whatever it is that we sought. So in other words, our connection to the land and what we're able to do with land was always something very, very powerful. You know, but now our construct of trade has been obviously shifted towards a piece of paper whose value is literally based on whether or not the person that's holding it believes it has value.
Right,
but we've bought in.
Right.
No, this thing is worth, you know, give me that instead of giving me 6 goats. You know, I'd rather have a couple of grands in my pocket. But I agree with Q. Yes, our identity, our culture, our heritage, what makes us uniquely who we are is what we should be selling and commercializing. And there are drips and drabs and glimmers of hope in that particular space. What I do choose to sort of not defy, because this truth hangs on both sides of the fence. On the one hand, the private sector and government can seem like a bottomless pit, but we also have them as partners. The private sector is a partner to the growth of businesses because they are also commercially and entrepreneurially minded.
Right.
But if you are not organized to justify what will happen with the income that we pour in here so you can secure an ROI for that entire value chain,
return on
they
investment,
cannot release what you require. They may be moved by your passion, which is where so many falter. Oh, I'm so moved by your passion. Okay, now, can you show me some financial forecasts?
Translate it.
Yeah, give me a cost breakdown.
Bottom line me.
Give me some leg. How long will be on the runway until we take off?
Yeah. Which is pragmatic.
And funny enough, ironically, the very things that we sometimes demonize, we have an enabling constitution, we have great policies. Yes, the implementation thereof can be scrutinized and questioned in terms of traction and penetration and better governance. That's all good and well. But at the same time, the reason why the borders are porous and people flood into this country that we also complain about so strongly, by the way, is because we have those systems. It's because our constitutional framework is an enabling one. Because what we want to use to drive economies is enabling. The private sector thrives here. Hence they do what? They still pour investment into this country so things work. So a system is not always something that works against you, but it's something that gives you routes to market. The only question is, can you get past all the hurdles in that system to get your space and occupy space at the retail end and commercialize your value chain? And for me, that's where the conversation really sits. How do we become part of the solution? So when you ask, if you think about that saying, if it is to be, I don't even need to complete it. It is up to me. If it is to be. If that was the framework and ethos, then the question would not be where is the health and safety body? I will now construct a health and safety body. And I will then lobby the players. And then that is it. Let us move. So the same thing in this particular space of cooking soul and being at the retail front. I think about my fellow vendors that called this a side hustle. And for many it is, by the way. Because a singular income, it's becoming difficult to keep your head above water.
Can't live like that anymore.
In this current economic climate. Generally speaking, it's becoming a need. So the need to express our hobbies in a way that has got tangible return and value is becoming important. And that is true about food. There are many players, but I believe the majority are losing and they are not winning. And that is a puzzle that we need to resolve so that we can say, all right, I think we have crafted and coined what I believe is a relative formula to succeed. We spread that, we enable, we grow. Compete. Such is the environment. So as you are complaining and they're opening up more franchises, those that have the deep pockets and have set themselves. Remember, they run on systems as well. They are run on systems. Compete. And if you cannot compete,
but you've successfully done,
you cannot get to the front.
Bring it back home and bring it back to us. I wish we had more time, because I think what we've just done now is actually just open the conversation. So we'll cut it here for now, but I think we'll continue this conversation on with more solutions and stuff like that. What I want to do before we close the segment is just have closing remarks. I'll do mine last. I'll do mine last because what you guys have done is actually really just open up the conversation. I'll give you 2 minutes each, just for you in a nutshell, to leave me and the audience with what you want us to remember if we forget anything you've said here today. I don't know who wants to go first. I'll go last.
All right. First of all, I'd like to say that I'd like to literally just bring to light why this man is sitting right here on the same couch with me.
Sure.
Now, this is a blood brother of mine, from a father who was born in 1942, an academic man. So, unfortunately, within our growth, there was a time where we separated. I felt like I was not spending enough time with him. I was always away from the family. We are growing, and then when the Bride Master was being advertised on TV, I just saw it as the perfect adventure, to reach out to my young brother and say, you know what, come through, join me, let's go on this trip, let's have fun, but also at the same time, our bond will, it will build up, we'll find out more about each other. And so on that journey, that was the journey that literally ignited this Cooking Soul fire. That is where Cooking Soul started from, because a lot of activities that we saw on the Bride Master that we experienced, we every now and then would say, hey, do you remember Ugogo Ekai?
Yeah.
Do you remember Sihlinza Inkomo Ekai?
Yeah.
So a lot of things brought us back to our roots, took us back to our roots, and the Cooking Soul journey literally has built up from there, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where it began. Almost 60 days on the road, over 6,000 kilometers driving this entire country. It's an experience that it touches you. You cannot be not touched by that. And the lens was food. Great for the relationship. People say family businesses are tough, and I absolutely agree.
I tend to disagree.
But the only question is, which side of the fence do you want to be on? Do you want to be the family business that never worked, or do you want to be the family business that does work? I believe there's something here. And I think it's time to turn it into something that we can also see in the bank. And I think that's the story I want to be a part of. The success of turning a food hobby, for me, as a braai buddy, an accidental cooking soul, but a very intentional, successful player in industry.
Which is also
That's the journey.
the dream and hope of the other food traders in the same space.
Yeah, a lot of other.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I was just going to add to what the both of you said.
Yes.
More specifically, when you said it's a side hustle for some, and I have an internal chuckle because what's a side hustle for many of us is actually the main hustle. But circumstances make it a side hustle because the sustainer of our livelihoods is what we're not entirely passionate about, but a system that works. And hence a salary is able to come out of there, and a mortgage and a bond is serviced, rent is paid, a car is paid for, school fees is paid for. Then a passion becomes a side hustle because there's no time to dream.
There's no time.
There's no time to manifest what's within the pride that's within us, because for a long time, and I wanted to get into that to say, what did your dad think?
Yes.
In the 90s when you choose to go and cook. At a time when we're getting our independence, apartheid isanda kuphela. Ufuna ukupheka ndoda. What are you talking about? This is time for us to make money. This is time for us to be a doctor, be a lawyer. Be something that we know, is practical and it pays money. So it's a side hustle at the moment only because of circumstances for many native black South Africans. I can tell you for a fact, myself included. If the situation were turned around, the main hustle would be the side hustle.
Yes,
and the side hustle would be the main. Yeah. And I suppose that's why we're doing this. Because at some point it has to begin. There needs to be that transition because we're adults, we're matured people, we're living in a real contextual world. So we're not oblivious to how the world works and how systems work. But as you guys both eloquently put it, we obviously need to do the right things, and charity begins nowhere but home.
Yeah.
I give a fit. Me, I brought you the SMEs, and they sat here and they shared their expertise on the matter. I had a lovely time with the Mlagisi brothers, who own Cooking Soul. As you can see, they have a beautiful movement going, an organic business, a family-run business. But just like you and I, they have to go through life normally, like they've got bills to pay, they've got professional careers, they've got families, and they have obviously the same challenges to face as everybody. But I think there's always room for us, to look at the situation as it is and see what more can we do with our time to make sure that we leave a legacy that's lasting, but also a legacy that's moving the needle forward in some way, so that by the time that we're resting in peace, our descendants are able to pick up from where we left off and are able to say, listen, I'm proud to have been a child of Xolisa Mayoyo because he has been able to use the resources that he's been given to move the needle forward, not only in terms of our namesake, but also in terms of enterprise, in terms of commerce, in terms of business, in terms of impact, and in terms of overall bettering society in one way or another. Join us again next time as we delve deeper into the dynamic topic and subject matter of hospitality in South Africa. Cheers.